Good evening, everyone. 8:05 on this Tuesday. Joining us here in the Wave Extra studio, our Wave Now studio. I'm Jose Sosaya. I always appreciate you joining us. However, you're tuning in, whether that's through our Wave Now app on your smart TV or your favorite device at home. Maybe tune in again on our favorite social channels. Always appreciate you tuning in. Connect with us, leaving comments, things that are on your mind. Top stories, obviously, a little bit to get to and a mixed bag of sorts. We're going to start with, some topics that have been driving a lot of discussion, really starting from the weekend, and some things we'll, of course, keep digging into as the days ahead move on. So one of those being, I guess, the city responding to reports that a lot of us have been digging into. Again, the weekend party pertaining to sort of what police's response was on River Road Saturday night, and in particular, where they seem to be concentrating where the Stella's venue was. And to that end, Mayor Craig Greenberg, hearing from him in this afternoon, praising LMPD's response time, its actions, breaking up what they were calling a quote pop-up party. That was their verbiage use there, and you can get a visual right now to see what we all saw with our cameras and what police officers presumably saw themselves. So Mayor Greenberg describing it himself as a large unauthorized gathering at this event space. We know it is Stella's venue, but more from them in a moment. The mayor claims party organizers actually let hundreds of teens and young adults under 21 into the building, and that exceeded limits that the fire marshal sets. And again, these are the mayor's words, that hundreds of the young people gathered in the parking lot, many of them, again, underage and drinking. But you're seeing just kind of the crowd gather at that particular spot toward one of those doors. The mayor's words, quote, "These were unsafe conditions. ABC and LMPD quickly and proactively broke up the gathering, preventing any fights or injuries to anyone who was gathering that evening." Now, maybe you were there and you happen to see a different perspective, depending on where you were, wanted to come to the party, or were already inside and just saw this crowd kind of building up in there. So perhaps if you wanted to let us know. Shout out, by the way, to PBP. We'll get to that, of course. Exciting story in just a bit. Now, you've been following along us getting in or getting responses from people who were there. The caterer telling Wave troubleshooters that he thought this event was for folks 30 years old and up. But apparently, when he realized there was going to be an 18 and up crowd, he didn't even go to open the bar. He says people brought outside alcohol in. And to this point, no one's issued any citations. Now, when it comes to Stella's, and this is a much calmer perspective, I believe we had this took this video either from Monday or Tuesday afternoon. But Stella's event venue shared a statement with us saying that people were leaving the Sky Soul Fest at the waterfront, and then they were trying to get into the private event. So that is the management's perspective. They say once they learned of a, quote, breach in event integrity, they shut down the bar and began clearing out guests who were not invited. Stella says they didn't have anything to do with the nearby parking lot party, but that they will make some changes for future bookings. They go on to say in part of their statement, quote, "This includes proactively monitoring citywide events, particularly those that are happening at or near the waterfront, to avoid any more interference or unintended overlap with private functions hosted at their facilities." So again, a story with bunch of different layers we'll be keeping an eye out for, and should any other future planned events, parties pop up, and seeing how ABC and Metro might respond to crowd control and how crowds might funnel after a particular concert or festival out on the riverfront will be interesting to follow in that respect. Now, also something we found interesting here at the Wave desk and in the newsroom. If you haven't read this, and it may be up on our website on wave3.com, but if not, we'll go over some of the details here that UofL researchers, so again, really fascinating research, and it speaks to sort of this public health crisis we've kind of heard come up to the forefront over the last couple of years when it comes to the health impacts of loneliness. So these researchers are starting up a project to help Louisville's older adults. So a keen focus on seniors in this, and the team says they want to make them feel less lonely. And so we'll pull up some of those key factors they'd like to discuss in the research. So it's a 5-year project. They're going to research neighborhood level data, community engagement activities, targeted interventions, but again, catering to folks ages 65 and older. The team's goal, again, to pinpoint what contributes to loneliness and reduce it among seniors. National research has linked loneliness, and this speaks if you've come across those headlines or even read what the Surgeon General had reported not too long ago in their findings, greater risks of depression, cognitive decline, and chronic illness as factors exacerbated alongside with loneliness. And researchers hope to release a survey about loneliness in around next month. So we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of weeks. And as far as more stories for you in this particular part before we go to break. So let me pull that up for you here. Okay. So looking into matters for the consent decree. So the next step involved, which if you were paying attention and we were checking on those votes from Metro Council approving a measure that adopted and endorsed many of those reforms, the city right now, a next step in the process is to hire an independent monitor to oversee that those steps and those endorsements, promises are kept and everything is followed through. But before the person is hired, the independent monitor, the city says it wants to hear from folks who are tuning in right now on this live stream. They want to know what you think would make someone qualified and the right person for the job. And so believe that opportunity is happening. If it's not already happening or still going, it had started this afternoon at around 6. So our Wave News anchor, Brian Schlonsky, decided to take a closer look at what some people might like to find out in the process and the end result of that right person, that right candidate for the job.
We are all committed to building a community where justice is promised and practiced every day.
Tuesday, Mayor Craig Greenberg doubling down on the city's intent to keep the consent decree alive. The agreement between LMPD, Metro government, and the citizens of Louisville was dismissed last month by the Department of Justice, ending the federal oversight that was put in place to address what was described in 2023 as patterns of constitutional violations within LMPD, highlighted after the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor. The DOJ stating that the consent decree was reliant on faulty legal theory with cherry-picked stats, and that was the reason for its dismissal. But the mayor says the reforms and improvement efforts will continue anyway. The next step, hiring someone to oversee it all.
An independent monitor is going to be hired as a neutral evaluator of Louisville Metro government's and LMPD's progress towards implementing the community commitment.
So who would this person be and what type of background or skill set would they have? The answer to those questions could be up to you.
We're asking the community what qualities and or qualifications do they want to see in the independent monitor.
Dr. Vanessa McPhail is the executive director for the Office of Equity. She's in charge of hosting public listening sessions where you can make your voice heard about who should be hired. She says this is meant to be an open and honest conversation.
Just come with an open mind and ready to have open discussion.
The end of the regular season,
Try to pause that. Apologize for the video you're seeing there on wave3.com. But again, our thanks to Brian for that reporting. So as I mentioned, that listening session for the consent decree independent monitor. So we're not sure if it had wrapped up already. It was at the YMCA on West Broadway. But if you'd like to join the next one, it'll be June 28th. That's going to be June 28th, 10 a.m. at the Newburgh Community Center. And you can register online beforehand, but you're not required to. Now, the video here is if you always wanted to catch up with Dawn and all her reports. But the big headline, and I know that was the first post we had on our socials from our first user at PvP. They are saying go Cards. The big headline, of course, to highlight UofL winning against Oregon State at College World Series. Let me know if you were tuning in, watching the late ninth inning action. Unfortunately, maintaining that lead at the top of the ninth and just pressure for the pitchers with Oregon State, of course, mounting that comeback. You could stem just the flow of the offense from Oregon State. So keeping that tied heading into the bottom of the ninth for Alex Alicea, a little bit of redemption, of course, trying to make a double play on the ball grounder that had happened at the top of the ninth, but just could not get the read. And he managed to get the walk. And after a couple bases loaded, the opportunity arrived for budding legend Eddie King Jr. to walk it off with a sacrifice fly. So here we are, UofL winning against Oregon State to live another day, but the challenge growing ever greater because now the Cards have to face off Coastal Carolina on their amazing 20-plus game win streak. Make sure you tune in tonight. Kendrick Haskins big ups to him as he's following the roller coaster madness of this postseason for Cardinal baseball, getting, of course, insight and reaction from Coach McDonald and the players about just maintaining their cool and not losing composure or focus to walk away with a big win to live another day in Omaha. You can, of course, find all of that, the big updates with the Cards, some big investigations and stories we're all taking care of here. It is on wave3.com. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back here with this segment of Wave Extra. Welcome back to Wave Extra. We're here at the desk. Of course, always appreciate you chiming in on the stories that we're discussing here at this evening hour. For example, shout out to Wally Caspers. We were discussing some of the stories looking into, this was a comment, as UofL researchers are looking at those contributing factors to loneliness among seniors and perhaps, how to mitigate some of the negative health outcomes, greater risk of depression, chronic illness. Wally perhaps mentioning non-athletic activity. So something that would, be conducive in helping our neighbors who are seniors find that, energy or a company or just that support to help get them some exercise. So it could be something, of course, the researchers will look into as the surveys and the further research is done into this particular story. So an investigative report we wanted to share with you tonight, if you haven't seen this already. Now, no one ever wants to be in this situation. It's unfortunate, but it's good to know that we have a hospital where we can go to if our kids, for example, ever need an emergency care. For some families, an ER, the closest one you might have, it's a last resort, and many times it'll be a lifeline just to make sure that they can make it through the night. But again, our investigators looked at a new study. It found the majority of emergency departments across the U.S., so it's not a specific regional thing, but as a whole, the majority of ER departments are not fully prepared to meet specific needs for some pediatric patients. So national investigative reporter Heather Graff talks to doctors behind this particular research, shows you why they say an affordable life-saving solution does already exist. And so we'll take a further look at this.
My daughter, Rebecca Ava, was born July 13th, 2006. She was born healthy. She was beautiful.
When Phyllis Rabinowitz took her baby girl home from the hospital, she had no idea her family's joy would be fleeting.
Unfortunately, by the end of the day, we felt that she was having very alarming symptoms.
Symptoms that prompted a panicked trip to the emergency room.
She was not feeding well. She was not breathing well.
But Phyllis says doctors in the ER sent her daughter back home.
They thought it was a common cold.
And just a few days later,
It changed our lives forever.
Rebecca was gone.
At 9 days old. We called the ambulance. We rushed back to the emergency room, and there was nothing left to do because the virus that had taken over her body just moved that fast.
Phyllis says an autopsy later revealed Rebecca had died from a viral infection that went undiagnosed in the ER and therefore untreated.
We quickly learned that many emergency rooms aren't prepared for children. It's causing deaths.
Are children dying unnecessarily because of this?
The answer is yes.
It's a phenomenon Dr. Nathan Cooperman has been researching for years. He's the chief academic officer at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. And while ERs and pediatric hospitals like this one are specially equipped to treat kids, he says that is not the norm in many community hospitals across the country. The National Pediatric Readiness Project evaluates ERs on criteria that include the availability of child-size equipment, along with pediatric-specific protocols and training. High pediatric readiness defined as scoring at least 88 out of 100 on that assessment.
I don't want parents to panic, but this is important.
Cooperman's latest study, in partnership with Dr. Craig Newgard of Oregon Health and Science University, analyzed data from nearly 5,000 emergency departments nationwide and found just 17% had that high level of readiness. In other words, 83% of those emergency rooms are not fully prepared to care for children.
Each year in the United States, about 8,000 children die after presenting to the emergency department. And our estimate is probably 25% of those deaths could be prevented if the hospital moved to the high readiness state.
So more than 2,000
More than 2,000 children per year, exactly.
Researchers also used predictive models to determine what it would take to bridge that gap. And this map illustrates what Cooperman considers to be eye-opening results. The estimated annual cost to reach universal high pediatric readiness ranges from just $0 to $12 per child, depending on the state, for a total of about $207 million each year to cover every ER in the U.S.
$200 million a year is what we would call budget dust. It's affordable, very affordable.
To better understand how it's so affordable, he points to this checklist that provides critical but cost-effective ways to improve an ER's pediatric readiness score.
One of the most important things is what we call a PEC, P-E-C-C, a Pediatric Emergency Care Coordinator. That is, having somebody in every emergency department whose job is just to make sure that you have the protocols in place, you have all the equipment necessary. That is a very, very high return on investment.
And that caught your attention.
It did.
Tell me about that.
I'm glad this study came out to show us the gaps.
Dr. Steve English is medical director of the ER at Jamestown Regional Medical Center, about 100 miles outside Fargo, North Dakota. And in a rural area like this, he admits high pediatric readiness can be difficult to achieve.
Turnover is a big part of it. It's hard to recruit people to rural North Dakota.
Despite those challenges, the staff here recently began working to better prepare for their youngest patients. This color-coded pediatric cart, perhaps one of the simplest of the recommended changes.
We open a drawer and the specific equipment is there already.
They also convinced hospital administrators to invest in certain youth-specific supplies, and Dr. English himself is now trained as the Pediatric Emergency Care Coordinator. He says all of it helped raise the ER's pediatric readiness score by 14 points in just a matter of months.
Not where we want to be quite yet, but I think we're definitely better prepared.
A success story in North Dakota. And back in Washington, D.C., Dr. Cooperman hopes policymakers will also be compelled to take action.
I think the federal government or state governments do need to be involved. And this is a roadmap for legislators to say, hey, in your state, you can do this by investing this amount per year.
This is my memory box of my daughter, Rebecca.
Until then, Phyllis Rabinowitz says she'll keep sharing Rebecca's story.
I never got to know her. I never got to see her grow up. It's 18 years later, but I feel like it was yesterday.
18 years of grief and 18 years of advocacy. But after learning about this new research, she feels real change is finally within reach.
Let's do this. Let's do this now. We can.
That was national investigative reporter Heather Graff with that update. And right now, what you're looking at is a satellite image from our satellite network looking at night in Israel. I believe it's Tel Aviv. Just an update from the Associated Press for big international news. Just came in down the wires. Israel claiming to have killed a top Iranian general, trading more strikes with the government. President Trump warning Tehran residents to evacuate, suggesting the U.S. Might give up on the table negotiations. Trump left the G7 summit in Canada a day early to deal with the conflict between the two regimes, telling reporters he was looking at something, quote, better than a ceasefire. He said the U.S. wanted to see a real end to the conflict, which could involve the Iranian government, quote, giving up entirely. So the images, again, from out in the Middle East looking calm tonight. And we'll, of course, have those updates further into the evening. So you can check in with us on Wave News at 11. All right, stay with us. After the break, want to share a pleasant wave surprise. We're going to call it a wonderful wave surprise because it involves one of our own and a milestone moment. So stay tuned to this nightly edition of Wave Extra. Hey, 27 on this Tuesday evening, and we're watching the sunset. This is our view from our Skytrack camera, observing the other side of the river and looking at the traffic crossing the bridge in New Albany. So again, looking nice, calm, quiet, some thin scattering of clouds above us. Now, calling this the lull in between what could be some pretty serious weather. Now, you can always tune in tonight and tomorrow. Chief Meteorologist Kevin Harnett, he's going to break down what to look out for as they're tracking this alert day coverage. And of course, the storm tracking team will keep us abreast of everything that is going on. So a little bit of consumer news as we're rounding out the half hour. Now, perhaps you've been keeping track of, groceries and those other expenses, sometimes those big ticket items if you're in the market and it is summertime. Cars, for example, prices have been holding steady despite the tariff policies that are in place. Question now for economists is how long the trends are going to last. So reporter Karen Kafa is in Washington looking at what is driving those numbers. And that will be interesting to see if we can pull that up. Okay, here's Karen Kafa.
A drop in auto sales dragged down overall retail sales last month, according to a government report that was released on Tuesday. And that sluggish demand may be helping to keep auto prices down for now, but analysts say maybe not too long. Even with 25% tariffs on all imported cars and auto parts implemented by the Trump White House for the last 2 months, auto prices haven't skyrocketed the way some analysts expected.
We have a lot of information about what will happen, what could happen, what should happen, but it's not materialized on the dealers' lots because we still have millions of vehicles in inventory.
Consumer caution amid economic uncertainty could be keeping prices in neutral for now. Car buying research site Edmunds.com found the price paid for new cars in May dipped 0.2% on average compared to April. That's after auto sales climbed in March as some consumers sought to get ahead of tariffs. Commerce Department data showed car and auto parts sales slid 3.5% in May from April, a big part of an overall pullback in retail sales.
By having fewer consumers say, let's go dealership right here, right now, buy a car, it does prolong how long it will take before the tariff cars show up.
But David Tinsley of the Bank of America Institute says their research predicts tariffs will boost prices higher within months.
Bank of America Global Research does expect, supply chain problems on cars to continue. And that will, I think, over time, put upward pressure on prices. It will just take some months to come through, I think.
Ivan Drury, director of insights at car buying research site Edmunds.com, says automakers may wait until the new model year, typically early fall, to pass along added costs.
It's not one of those things where you don't expect to see price changes, especially when you go from 25 to 26. It kind of masks that a little bit.
Edmunds said back in March that automakers had between a 30 and 77-day supply of cars on the lots, depending on the manufacturer. But even with sales, those pre-tariff supplies will be dwindling soon. In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
And the last thing before we head out from the OTT studio here at Wave News 3, a wonderful surprise that's been months in the making, I would know, because a lot of us have been privy to the planning, the logistics, everything that involves perhaps asking the biggest question you might ask in life, and that would involve with your potential future spouse or partner. Will you marry me? And we've been, pretty lucky to see sort of all the work that our dear coworker and friend Dusty Baker had put into this question. A lot of tension he was feeling leading up to this afternoon over at the Kentucky Derby Museum. But thankfully, we reassured him it was all going to work out. Let us know what you think when we play this, because it's going to I think it's going to make your heart sing once we play this. It was a long time coming and a very surreal and sweet moment for the lovely couple. So let's play this for you really quick.
Madeline Paige Carter, will you marry me?
Yes.
The two giggling couple, both with their nervous laughter. A huge congratulations, not just to Dusty, but of course his new fiance, bride-to-be, Madeline. You might recognize her because she's worked as well here in Louisville. There she is, showing off the pretty amazing rock. We also got a sneak peek of that thanks to Dusty. There they are, gallivanting around Churchill Downs. Huge congratulations. These two met while Dusty was working on a story. Of course, that is the story that, sometimes tends to happen in our line of work. It's just wonderful to see a young couple now getting ready to embark on what will be an amazing adventure. And, it comes with its challenges for planning the wedding of their dreams, whatever that's going to be. But if you happen to notice where Dusty did pop the question to Madeline, it is in the 360 video theater. If you've ever been to the Kentucky Derby Museum, just a surround sound experience, visually, audially. Dusty produced this entire video, and we were told that Madeline, of course, dressed to impress, dressed to success, wonderfully dressed in the combo in red. She thought she was going to go MC a special dinner event at the museum, when, in fact, this was all part of an elaborate plan to make sure she would look her very best when Dusty was kind of hiding there in the wings to ask the question, would she marry him? Thankfully, she said yes. Congratulations, you two. And that's going to do it for us here on Wave Extra. Appreciate you joining us on the Wave Now app, all the different socials. Again, you can always reach out, by phone, by email. Connect with us as we're growing this segment and this audience for this time for you to connect with us as we're streaming. So that's going to do it for us. If you're looking ahead to Wave News at 11, Logan Perone, our reporter Logan, looking into his own stories, break down some highlights. Thanks to Kendrick, that nail-biting walk-off win by Cardinal Baseball. Lots to get to. We will be there. Appreciate you joining us. Take care.